A wrong number usually ends with an awkward apology. For Susie Charles, it ended with a war. Locked in a restaurant freezer, watching her fingers turn blue, trapped by the manager who'd been terrorizing her for months, she tried to text her father for help. Her hands were shaking too hard. She mistyped one digit. That message didn't go to her father. It went to the burner phone of Salvatore Moretti, Chicago's most feared mafia boss, a number reserved for emergencies from establishments under his protection. Mancini's wasn't one of them. What happens when a desperate waitress accidentally summons a monster? The answer is brutal, unexpected, and transformative. This is the story of He Locked Me In. The sound of a freezer door locking from the outside is distinct. It isn't a soft click like a bedroom door. It is a heavy metallic thunk that echoes through steel walls. Susie Charles heard that sound before she understood what it meant. Then the lights died, plunging her into absolute darkness, replaced by a bone-deep cold that crept up from the concrete floor. She stumbled forward, hands outstretched, breath already visible in the sudden chill. "Robert!" Her voice cracked. "This isn't funny." Silence answered. That was the worst part about Robert Mitchell. He didn't rage. He didn't make threats like the obvious predators. He was a restaurant manager with a gentle smile, a man who knew exactly how to make you doubt your own reality. Usually. Tonight he'd stopped pretending. Susie pressed against the door, unable to find the interior handle in the dark. Her fingers were already going numb. She looked at her phone. 7% battery, the screen an island of blue light in the blackness. She had to call someone. Her father. He would come. She tried to type his number. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The digits blurred. She hit send without checking. The text disappeared into the void. "Help me. Locked in freezer. Mancini's restaurant. I'm so cold. Please." Before we get to what happens next, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I am replying to everyone. The kitchen was empty by the time Robert found her. Susie had one arm deep in the industrial dishwasher, scraping congealed marinara from the spray nozzle, when she heard his footsteps behind her. Soft, deliberate, the way he always moved when the other staff had left. "Susie," his voice was pleasant, almost friendly. "Need your help with something before you clock out." She straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. The kitchen felt too quiet. The line cooks had left 20 minutes ago. Marco, the sous chef who usually closed with her, had called in sick. It was just the two of them now, just her and Robert, and the fluorescent hum of the empty restaurant. "I'm almost done here," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I can finish the inventory in the morning." "Won't take long." He smiled, that gentle, reasonable smile that made you doubt yourself. "Just need you to verify the meat count in the walk-in. Supplier's been shorting us. Need a witness." Her stomach tightened. She'd filed 3 HR complaints in the past 2 months. The comments, the way he'd corner her in the dry storage room, the text messages to her personal phone that she couldn't prove came from him. 2 days ago, she'd threatened to go directly to the owners. His smile hadn't wavered when she said it. That was what scared her most. "Can it wait until—" "Susie," the smile stayed fixed. "It'll take 5 minutes. Unless there's a reason you don't want to help me." The implication hung in the air. Difficult, uncooperative, not a team player. The words he'd use if she refused. She'd worked at Mancini's for 3 years. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She followed him to the back of the kitchen, past the prep stations and the dish pit, to the heavy steel door of the walk-in freezer. He pulled it open. Cold air rolled out, carrying the metallic smell of frozen meat. Inside, stainless steel shelves lined the walls, packed with plastic-wrapped cuts and labeled boxes. A single LED strip provided harsh white light. "After you," Robert said. She stepped inside. The cold hit her immediately, a physical pressure that made her breath catch. She was still wearing her thin work blouse under the apron. Her arms prickled with goosebumps. "Which shelf?" she asked, turning to face him. He stood in the doorway, one hand on the door handle. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not anger, something colder. Then the smile returned. "You should have kept your mouth shut," he said. The door swung closed. The heavy metallic thunk echoed through the steel walls. Then came the sound of the exterior bolt sliding home. Lock engaging. Final. Absolute. Then the lights died. Absolute darkness swallowed her. The kind of darkness that felt solid, pressing against her eyes. Susie lurched forward, hands outstretched, and slammed into the door. Her palms found smooth steel. She felt along the surface frantically, searching for the interior handle that should be there. That had to be there. Nothing, just cold metal and panic rising in her throat. "Robert!" She pounded on the door with both fists. "Robert, this isn't funny. Let me out." Silence. She strained to hear footsteps, voices, anything from the kitchen beyond. But the freezer was designed to seal. Thick insulation, industrial construction, built to keep temperature in and sound out. "Please," her voice cracked. She hammered harder, ignoring the pain blooming in her hands. "Somebody help me! Anyone!" No response. Of course not. The restaurant had closed an hour ago. The front-of-house staff were gone. Salvatore Moretti didn't keep the burner phone on his desk. It sat in the bottom drawer of the mahogany cabinet behind him. Wrapped in cloth, checked twice daily. A line reserved for emergencies. Restaurant owners under his protection knew the number. A lifeline when trouble came knocking, when the city's other predators mistook their establishments for easy marks. The phone buzzed at 2:34 a.m. He was still working, as he often did these hours. The Cicero contracts spread across his desk wouldn't review themselves, but the sound cut through his concentration like a blade. Salvatore turned, opened the drawer, and unwrapped the phone with methodical precision. One message. Unknown number. "Help me. Locked in freezer. Mancini's restaurant. I'm so cold. Please." He read it 3 times. Mancini's wasn't on his list. He pulled up the database on his desktop. Every establishment under his protection, every owner who'd paid for the privilege of using this number. Mancini's restaurant, West Division Street. No record, no contract, no connection. Someone had sent a desperate plea to the wrong number. Salvatore leaned back in his chair, studying the message. 23 years in this business had taught him to recognize authenticity. Scammers were elaborate. They constructed scenarios, added details, played on emotion. This was raw. 4 sentences. Terror compressed into 31 words. "I'm so cold." He stood, reaching for his coat. A wrong number wasn't his concern. A woman dying in a freezer because she misdialed. That calculation shifted. He pressed the intercom. "Luca, my office. Now." His lieutenant appeared within 90 seconds, alert despite the hour. Luca had been with him since the beginning, a man who understood orders without needing explanations. "Get the crew," Salvatore said, forwarding the message to Luca's phone. "We're going to West Division." Luca read the text, eyebrows rising fractionally. "Mancini's isn't—" "I know. You want to roll out for a wrong number?" Salvatore was already moving toward the door. "Someone locked this person in a freezer. If they're still alive when we arrive, I want them out. If they're not, I want to know who put them there." "Understood." 3 black SUVs converged on Mancini's restaurant at 2:47 a.m. The street was dead, storefronts dark, only the occasional flicker of streetlights breaking the shadows. The restaurant sat mid-block, windows black, no movement inside. Salvatore stepped out of the lead vehicle, 5 men forming a loose perimeter around him. The front door was locked. Heavy glass, metal frame. Secure. Around back, Salvatore said. They found the kitchen entrance in the alley, also locked, but the door was older, wood reinforced with steel. Salvatore nodded once. 2 of his men positioned themselves, shoulders braced. Break it down. 3 impacts. The frame splintered. The door swung inward with a crash that echoed off the alley walls. Salvatore entered first, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The kitchen stretched before him. Prep stations, industrial stoves, the metallic gleam of stainless steel. Everything orderly, everything silent. His beam swept across the space, finding the massive door at the back. Walk-in freezer. He crossed to it quickly, the crew fanning out behind him. The door was sealed. Heavy industrial construction, the kind that required serious effort to compromise. And there, on the exterior, a bolt lock. Simple, brutal, engaged. Salvatore ran his fingers over the metal. No rust. The mechanism was smooth, recently used. Someone had locked this door from the outside, recently enough that the metal still held warmth from human touch. Bolt cutters, he said quietly. Luca was already moving, returning with the tools. Salvatore stepped back, watching as Luca positioned the cutters on the lock's shank. One hard squeeze. The metal gave with a sharp crack. Open it! Luca pulled the door wide. Cold air billowed out, carrying the smell of frozen meat and something else. The faint, terrible scent of a human body in distress. Salvatore's flashlight found her immediately. She was crumpled against the back wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself. Young, mid-20s, wearing a stained work blouse and black pants. Her skin had taken on a grayish cast, lips blue, ice crystals forming in her dark hair. She wasn't moving. He was across the freezer in 3 strides, kneeling beside her, 2 fingers pressed to her throat. Pulse, faint, threading. Her breathing was so shallow it barely registered. She's alive, he said. Barely. Salvatore stripped off his coat, heavy wool still warm from his body, and wrapped it around her with efficient care. Then he slid his arms beneath her, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. Her head lolled against his chest. Up close, he could see her lips were cracked, bleeding from the cold. Get her to the car, he told Luca. Heat on maximum. Call Dr. Russo. Tell him hypothermia, severe. We're bringing her to the north office. He carried her through the dark kitchen, her shallow breaths, the only sound besides his footsteps. Behind him, his crew was already moving, photographing the freezer, the lock, documenting everything with cold professionalism. Outside, the night air felt tropical compared to the freezer's grip. Salvatore placed her carefully in the back seat of his SUV, adjusting the coat around her shoulders. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Drive, he said to his operator. Fast but smooth. Don't jar her. As the vehicle pulled away, Salvatore looked back at the darkened restaurant. Mancini's. Not under his protection, not his responsibility, but someone had locked this woman in a freezer and walked away. That made it personal. Robert Mitchell arrived at Mancini's at 6 a.m., keys jingling in his hand, whistling something tuneless. The morning was cold but clear, the kind of January dawn that made Chicago streets look almost clean. He'd rehearsed his story during the sleepless hours, the discovery, the horror. The frantic 911 call. She must have gone in there after I left. The door malfunctioned. A terrible accident. He'd check the freezer around 7. Give it enough time. Make sure. He unlocked the front door, stepped inside, locked it behind him. The dining room was dark, chairs still stacked on tables from last night's close. Everything normal, everything exactly as it should be. Then he noticed the light bleeding from the kitchen. Robert's whistling died. He hadn't left lights on. He never left lights on. He moved toward the double doors, pushed through, and stopped so abruptly he nearly stumbled. 4 men occupied his kitchen. Expensive suits, the kind that cost more than his monthly salary. 2 leaned against the prep counter, drinking coffee from Mancini's mugs. 1 stood by the walk-in freezer, arms crossed. The 4th sat on a stool near the dish pit, scrolling through his phone with professional disinterest. The back door hung off its hinges, splintered wood jutting like broken teeth. "What the—" Robert's voice came out higher than intended. "What are you doing in my restaurant?" "Your restaurant?" The voice came from behind him. Robert spun. A 5th man sat at the stainless steel prep counter he'd somehow missed. Older, 50 maybe, with salt and pepper hair swept back, and the kind of stillness that made you think of apex predators. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Robert's car, and beside him, wrapped in a heavy wool coat that swallowed her frame, sat Susie Charles. Alive, conscious, shaking violently despite the blanket, but undeniably alive. The room tilted. Robert grabbed the edge of the counter to steady himself. "You must be the manager," the man said. It wasn't a question. "Robert Mitchell, correct?" How did you—" Robert's brain scrambled for traction. "What are you doing here? Who are you? This is private property. I'm calling the police." "Interesting door lock you have." The man gestured toward the walk-in freezer without looking away from Robert. "Industrial grade. Heavy-duty bolt mechanism. The kind that can only be locked from the outside. Very secure. Very deliberate." Susie was staring at him. Her lips were still faintly blue, cracked and bleeding. Her eyes held something Robert had never seen there before. Not fear, not anymore. Understanding. "There was an accident," Robert heard himself say. "A malfunction. I don't know how—" "The power." The man pulled out his phone, scrolled with one hand. "You cut the power to the freezer at 11:47 p.m. Interesting time for maintenance, wouldn't you say? We found the breaker box. Fingerprints will be simple to verify." Robert's mouth went dry. That's not—" "We also found these." The man turned his phone screen toward Robert. Text messages. Robert's text to the food supplier, canceling this morning's delivery. His email to the assistant manager, telling Marco to call in sick. The careful construction of an empty restaurant. Witnesses eliminated. Discovery delayed. "How did you get—" Robert's voice cracked. "You can't access my—" "You'd be surprised what I can access." The man set the phone down with precise care. "Here's what happened. You locked Susie in that freezer. You cut the power. You left her to die. She managed to send one text before her phone died. That text reached me." "Who are you?" The question hung in the air. Nobody answered. The 4 other men didn't move, didn't react, but something in their collective stillness made Robert's skin crawl. "It doesn't matter who I am," the man said quietly. "What matters is that you're going to leave now. You're going to walk out of this restaurant and never come back. You will not contact Susie. You will not contact the owners. You will not contact anyone associated with Mancini's. You can't—" Robert tried to summon authority, manager's privilege, control. "This is my job. You can't just—" The man stood. He wasn't particularly tall, but something about the movement made Robert take an involuntary step backward. "If I see you near her again," the man said, each word precise and measured, "you will understand what real cold feels like." "Do you understand me?" Robert understood. He understood in the way prey understands a predator's growl. His hands were shaking now, mimicking Susie's tremor. Yes. Good. Leave." Robert left. He stumbled through the broken kitchen door into the alley, his breath coming in short gasps, his carefully constructed story disintegrating like ash. He made it 2 blocks before his legs gave out, and he had to lean against a brick wall, fighting the urge to vomit. His phone was in his hand before conscious thought caught up. He scrolled through contacts, found the number. Angelo Carboni's nephew, the one who'd helped him with that problem last year. Connected. Protected. The call connected on the third ring. "It's Robert Mitchell," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "From Mancini's. I need to talk to someone." "It's urgent." "Little early for urgent, Robert. Salvatore Moretti just invaded the restaurant." The lie came easily, built from panic and self-preservation. "Broke in during the night. Threatened me. He's trying to muscle in on neutral territory. The owners are going to be furious. I thought your family should know before this escalates." Silence on the other end. Then, "Moretti was there? You're sure?" "Positive. 4 of his guys. He made threats. Direct threats." "We'll handle it. Don't go back to the restaurant. Understand?" "Understood." Robert ended the call, leaning his head back against the cold brick. His heart was still racing, but something like control was returning. He'd lost the battle, but maybe, just maybe, he'd started a war that would solve his Susie problem permanently. Inside Mancini's kitchen, Salvatore watched the manager disappear into the morning. Beside him, Susie had stopped shaking quite so violently. "He's going to retaliate," she whispered. "He won't just leave this." "I know," Salvatore said. He was counting on it. The compound sat 20 minutes outside the city, hidden behind iron gates and mature oak trees that blocked the view from the road. Susie watched through the SUV's tinted windows as they passed 2 separate security checkpoints, each manned by professionals who nodded at Salvatore with quiet deference. The main house emerged from the landscaping like something from another era. Red brick, white columns, sprawling and elegant, but undeniably fortified. "Where are we?" Her voice was still hoarse from screaming in the freezer. "Somewhere safe," Salvatore said. "Dr. Russo is already here." The doctor was waiting in what appeared to be a library that had been converted into a makeshift examination room. Elderly, precise, with the kind of bedside manner that came from decades of treating injuries nobody reported to hospitals. He worked efficiently, checking her core temperature, examining her fingers where the frostbite had turned the tips in alarming purple-gray. "Lucky," Dr. Russo said, wrapping her hands in specialized bandages. "Another hour and you'd have lost these fingers. As it is, full recovery expected. Keep them warm, keep them elevated, no repetitive gripping for 2 weeks." Susie nodded numbly. Lucky. She'd been locked in a freezer to die, and she was lucky. The doctor left her with pills for the pain and instructions to rest. Salvatore remained, sitting in the leather chair across from the medical cot they'd set up for her, waiting until the door clicked shut. "You have questions," he said. "Hundreds. Start with the important ones." Susie pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The compound was warm, almost oppressively so, but she couldn't seem to stop shivering. "Why did you help me? You don't know me. That text was a wrong number." "It was." Salvatore leaned back, fingers steepled. "I run a protection business. Restaurants, clubs, certain establishments pay me to ensure their safety. Keep the predators away. handle problems. In exchange, they get a phone number. Emergency use only. Mancini's isn't one of yours. No. So why come? He was quiet for a moment, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. That message was real. 23 years in this business. You learn to recognize authenticity. People lie all the time about money, about loyalty, about threats. But real terror? That's distinct. I don't ignore real fear. Even from a stranger, especially from a stranger, it meant you weren't manipulating me. He paused. And now your leverage I didn't ask for. The honesty was almost shocking. Susie had expected platitudes, reassurances, maybe some noble justification, not this cold assessment. Leverage for what? Your former manager made a call this morning to the Carboni family, told them I invaded neutral territory, made threats, tried to muscle in on their operation. Salvatore's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his voice. Mancini sits on the border between my territory and theirs. Gray area, disputed. Your manager just made it a flashpoint. Because he's an idiot, Susie said bitterly. Because he's desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. Salvatore stood, moving to the window. Outside, 2 guards patrolled the grounds with practiced efficiency. You're safer here until this resolves. Few days, maybe a week. And then? Then we see what happens. They fell into silence. Susie's bandaged hands throbbed despite the painkillers. Her mind kept circling back to the freezer, the darkness, the absolute certainty that she was going to die alone on that concrete floor. The Thursday dinner rush, she said abruptly. 2 weeks ago, man in his 50s, gray suit, sat at table 7. Ordered the veal piccata, no capers, extra lemon. Drank 3 Macallan 18s, neat. Met with a younger guy, late 20s, nervous. They argued about a shipment. The younger guy called him Mr. DeLuca. Salvatore turned from the window. What? You ask why Mancini's matters. Territory, which means you need to know who operates there. Susie closed her eyes, pulling up memories with the clarity of photographs. Friday night, table 12. Woman, early 40s, expensive jewelry. Came in with Angelo Carboni's nephew. I've seen his picture in the papers. They had the corner booth, stayed for 3 hours. She gave him an envelope. He left it under his plate when they left. I gave it to him when he came back for it. How do you remember all this? She opened her eyes. I remember everything. Every customer, every conversation I overheard, every face. It's just how my brain works. Photographic memory, I guess, though that's not technically the right term. Salvatore crossed back to his chair, sitting with focused intensity. Every customer? From the past 3 years, yes. He pulled out his phone, scrolled, turned it toward her. A surveillance photo, grainy, taken from across the street. 2 men standing outside Mancini's. When was this? Susie asked. 6 months ago. She studied the image for 5 seconds. The one on the left came in every Tuesday for a month last spring. Always sat at the bar. Always ordered the rigatoni and a beer. Watched the door constantly. The one on the right I've never seen before. Salvatore showed her another photo, then another. She identified them all. Dates, habits, who they met with, what they discussed within her earshot. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, the information flowing naturally, precisely. When she finished, Salvatore set his phone down. His expression was different now. Calculating, interested. That memory of yours, he said slowly, that's valuable, exceptionally valuable. It's just remembering things. It's intelligence, documentation, the kind of information people kill for. And you carry it all in your head. He leaned forward. I'm going to make you an offer. You can work for me. Use that memory. Help me understand who moves through this city and why. I'll pay you well. Protect you. Give you purpose beyond slinging pasta. Or I relocate you somewhere safe and boring. New name, new city, enough money to start over. You walk away from all of this. Susie looked down at her bandaged hands. 24 hours ago, she'd been terrified of her manager. Now she was sitting in a mobster's compound being offered a job that would keep her neck deep in exactly the kind of danger Robert represented. If I say yes, she said carefully, what exactly would I be doing? Remembering, Salvatore said, and telling me what you remember. Nothing more. For now. For now. The qualifier hung in the air between them. Can I think about it? You have until you're recovered. He stood. Rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. He moved toward the door, then paused. Susie, that message you sent, the one that reached me instead of your father. Do you believe in fate? She thought about the freezer, the shaking hands, the single mistyped digit. I don't know, she said honestly. Do you? Salvatore smiled, the expression brief and unreadable. I'm starting to. The call came at 3 in the afternoon. Salvatore was in his office reviewing property records when Luca appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, expression tight. Carboni's lawyer, Luca said. Says it's urgent. Salvatore took the phone, putting it on speaker. This is Moretti. Mr. Moretti. The voice was smooth, professional, the kind of lawyer who specialized in problems that never saw courtrooms. My name is Vincent Gallo. I represent the Carboni family's interests. I'm calling regarding an incident at Mancini's restaurant. I'm listening. We've received a statement from the restaurant manager, Robert Mitchell. He claims you and your associates forcibly entered the establishment in the early morning hours, made threats against his person, and used a civilian emergency as pretext to justify invading territory that falls under Carboni protection. Salvatore's jaw tightened fractionally. Robert Mitchell is a liar and an attempted murderer. The civilian emergency was real. The woman he locked in a freezer to die is currently recovering at my facility. That's precisely the issue. Papers rustled on the other end of the line. The Carboni family questions the timing and nature of this alleged emergency. We find it convenient that you responded to a distress call from a restaurant that's been a point of territorial dispute for 6 months. She sent the wrong number. I responded. End of story. Perhaps, which is why we like to verify the facts, we're requesting you turn over the woman, Susie Charles, according to Mitchell, for testimony. Neutral location, neutral parties present. She tells her story. We verify there's no territorial play happening. Everyone walks away, satisfied. The request was wrapped in reasonable language, but Salvatore heard the threat beneath it. Turn her over. Let us confirm she's not an asset. Let us determine if she's worth keeping or disposing of. No, Salvatore said flatly. I'm sorry? She stays with me. She's under my protection now. Silence stretched across the line. When Gallo spoke again, the professional courtesy had thinned considerably. Mr. Moretti, the Carboni family is trying to handle this diplomatically. We're offering you a chance to prove your intentions are as innocent as you claim. My intentions don't require proof. A woman nearly died. I intervened. That's the beginning and end of my interest in Mancini's. Then you won't object to Ms. Charles confirming that independently. I object to you treating a victim like evidence. She's not going anywhere. Another pause, longer this time. Then we have a problem, Moretti. Apparently we do. The line went dead. Salvatore set the phone down with controlled precision. Luca was already moving, pulling up security feeds, checking perimeter cameras. They'll push, Luca said. This was the diplomatic option. Next comes the alternatives. I know. We could relocate her. Get her out of the city tonight. Remove the catalyst. No. Salvatore stood, moving to the window. Outside, Susie was walking the grounds with Dr. Russo, her bandaged hands held carefully at her sides. She stays. Why? Luca's question wasn't a challenge, just genuine curiosity. Why risk a war over a waitress you didn't know existed 3 days ago? Salvatore watched Susie pause by the fountain, tilting her head back to catch winter sunlight. Because Robert Mitchell thought he could kill her and walk away clean. Because the Carbonists think they can demand her like property. Because if I give her up now, I'm telling every predator in this city that desperation is a viable strategy. That's principle. Principle starts wars. Then we go to war. The door opened behind them. Susie stood in the threshold, Dr. Russo hovering uncertainly behind her. Her color was better today, the blue tinge gone from her lips, but her eyes held the sharp awareness of someone who'd heard enough. I'm the problem, she said, not a question. You're the excuse, Salvatore corrected. There's a difference. She stepped fully into the office, closing the door. I heard some of that call. They want me for testimony. If I go, this ends. No conflict, no war. You're not going. It's my choice. No, Salvatore said, the word hard as iron. You leave when I say, and I don't say. Susie's expression shifted, surprise, then something that might have been relief. You're risking everything for someone who sent you a wrong number. I'm risking everything because giving you up would make me weak. Weakness invites challenges. Challenges become wars anyway, just slower and messier. He turned from the window to face her fully. You want to feel less like a burden? Then be useful. How? Luca's phone buzzed. He checked it, muttered a curse. Gallo just sent a follow-up. The Carbonists are proposing a neutral meeting. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., location, Mancini's restaurant. He looked up. They want to discuss terms in good faith. It's an ambush, Salvatore said immediately. Obviously, Luca scrolled through the message. They're suggesting minimal security on both sides. You, them, witnesses only. Professional conversation. They'll have shooters in place before we arrive. Multiple positions, overlapping fields of fire. The moment we step through that door, we're in a kill box. Susie cleared her throat. Both men turned to her. I know every inch of that restaurant, she said quietly. Every blind spot, every exit, every place someone could hide. I worked there for 3 years. I know where the sight lines are blocked, where the security cameras don't reach, which doors stick and which open silent. Salvatore studied her. You're offering intelligence. I'm offering to help you survive an ambush in the place I used to serve breadsticks. She held up her bandaged hands. You saved my life. Let me help you keep yours. Luca looked skeptical. No offense, but what can a waitress tell us that reconnaissance can't? That the dry storage room has a false wall installed 2 years ago. That the basement connects to the building next door through an old speakeasy tunnel. That Table 7's booth is bolted to the floor because the owner's uncle died there, and he's superstitious. Susie's voice grew stronger. That the walk-in freezer's exterior bolt was installed 6 months ago by Robert, not the owners, and nobody ever questioned why. The room fell silent. Start talking, Salvatore said. Everything you know, every detail. Susie sat down, closed her eyes, and began to speak. The restaurant materialized in her words. Dimensions, layouts, weaknesses, strengths. Luca started taking notes, then gave up and just recorded her. She spoke for 20 minutes without pause, without hesitation, pulling up 3 years of observations with photographic precision. When she finished, Salvatore was smiling. Not the pleasant mask he showed strangers. Something genuine and predatory. "They want Mancini's to be my grave," he said. "Instead, we'll make it theirs." Salvatore cleared the conference table with one sweep of his arm, scattering files and laptops to the side. Luca produced a large sheet of drafting paper and spread it flat. Susie stood at the head of the table, a pencil in her bandaged hand, the grip awkward but functional. "Draw it," Salvatore said. "Everything." She started with the outer walls, sketching the restaurant's footprint from memory. Her lines were confident despite the bandages, muscle memory translating 3 years of navigating the space into precise dimensions. The dining room took shape first. 22 tables, 4 booths, the bar running along the east wall. Then the kitchen, prep stations positioned exactly as they'd been when she'd scrubbed marinara from dish nozzles. "Camera here," she said, marking an X near the front entrance. "And here behind the bar. Owner installed them after a robbery 3 years ago. They cover the register and the front door, but nothing else. He was too cheap for a full system." Luca leaned in, studying the layout. "Blind spots?" "Everywhere else." Susie sketched quickly, shading areas. The entire kitchen, both bathrooms, the hallway to the basement, the dry storage room, the office. You could hide an army back there, and the cameras would never see them. "Basement access?" Salvatore asked. "Here." She drew a staircase behind the kitchen. "It's technically storage now, but it used to be something else. There's a tunnel, old speakeasy era, I think, runs under the street to the building next door. Some clothing boutique owns it now, but the tunnel entrance on their side is just boarded up, not sealed." Salvatore exchanged a look with Luca. "You been down there?" "Once. Robert sent me to get Christmas decorations 2 years ago. The tunnel entrance is behind some old shelving units. Most people don't even know it exists." She paused, pencil hovering. "But Robert knew. I saw him use it." "For what?" "Letting people in and out without using the front door. Usually late at night, after close. I worked late inventory a few times and saw him. Men in expensive coats carrying bags. They'd come up from the basement, meet with Robert in the office, then leave the same way." She added details to the basement area of her sketch. "I recognized one of them from the newspapers later. Carlo Tessio. He's Carboni crew." Luca pulled out his phone, scrolling through files. "Tessio runs collections in that district. If he was using Mancini's basement for handoffs." He looked up at Salvatore. "Robert's been helping them operate in disputed territory for at least 2 years. Which means the Carbonis think they have a claim to Mancini's," Salvatore said quietly. "And Robert's their proof." Susie continued drawing, adding the alley behind the restaurant, the delivery entrance, the dumpster placement. "The kitchen delivery door doesn't lock properly. The bolt's been broken for 8 months. Robert kept saying he'd fix it, but never did. You can push it open from outside with enough force. Could a crew of 6 fit through?" "Easily. It opens into the prep area, right here." She marked the position. "Complete blind spot from both cameras. You could stage an entire team there, and nobody in the dining room would see them." Salvatore studied the drawing with the focus of a general planning a siege. His finger traced paths through the restaurant, calculating angles and timing. "The Carbonis will position shooters in the kitchen, probably the office too, covering the front door. They'll expect us to walk in the main entrance at 8 p.m. like civilized people having a meeting." "So we don't," Luca said. "So we arrive at 6. Salvatore's finger moved to the delivery entrance. Come in through here. Position our crew in their ambush positions before they arrive. When the Carbonas walk in expecting to find us sitting at a table like targets, they'll find us waiting in their own kill zones. They'll bring serious numbers, Luca warned. This isn't a message, it's an execution. They want you dead and the territory cleared. Then they'll be disappointed. Salvatore looked at Susie. What else? She pointed to the walk-in freezer. There's a ventilation shaft that connects to the building next door. It was supposed to be sealed when they renovated, but the contractor cut corners. Robert used it once when he locked himself out. Crawled through to the boutique's stockroom, came around front. It's tight, but a person could fit. Emergency exit route, Luca noted, adding it to his tactical assessment. And the freezer itself. Susie's voice hardened. The interior handle was removed. Robert did it himself about 6 months ago. Claimed it was malfunctioning, sent it out for repair. It never came back. Anyone locked in there has no way out. The room fell quiet. Salvatore's expression darkened. He's been planning this for months, Lucas said. Not just you. Anyone who crossed him. They'll bring him, Susie said abruptly. Both men looked at her. Robert, to the meeting. They'll use him to identify me. Prove I'm the woman from the freezer. Show they have legitimate concerns about your territorial moves. He's their witness. Probably, Salvatore agreed. I want to be there. The words came out firm, surprising even herself. In the restaurant, I want Robert to see me. Absolutely not, Luca said immediately. You're the asset they want. Walking you into an ambush is strategic, Salvatore interrupted, still studying the layout. They're expecting me to hide her, to protect her like valuable property. If she's standing right there, visible, it changes their calculations, makes them hesitate. It makes her a target. I'm already a target, Susie said. The moment Robert called them, the moment you refused to hand me over. At least this way, I'm a target on my terms, in a place I know better than anyone. Salvatore met her eyes. You understand what you're asking? This isn't theoretical. People will die in that restaurant tomorrow night. I understand. You'll follow orders exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. I'm not stupid enough for heroics. I just want Robert to see me alive. I want him to know he failed. A thin smile crossed Salvatore's face. Fair enough. He turned to Luca. Get Marco. Have him walk her through basic situational awareness. Where to stand, how to move, what to do if shooting starts. She doesn't need to fight, she needs to survive. Luca nodded, pulling out his phone. Susie looked down at her drawing. The restaurant she'd worked in for 3 years, now transformed into a battlefield. Her battlefield. The place where Robert had tried to kill her, where she'd sent that desperate text into the void, where everything had changed. One more thing, she said. The freezer door. The bolt Robert installed. What about it? It's not standard issue. He special ordered it. Extra heavy duty. The kind you'd use on a bank vault. She met Salvatore's eyes. He didn't just want to lock people in. He wanted to make sure they could never get out, no matter what. Even if someone came looking. Salvatore studied the freezer's position on the drawing, the delivery entrance nearby, the basement access. Then we'll make sure, he said softly, that Robert understands exactly what that feels like. The delivery entrance gave with a soft metallic groan at 5:47 p.m. Salvatore entered first, weapon drawn, sweeping the darkness with practiced efficiency. The kitchen was exactly as Susie had described, prep stations gleaming dully in the ambient light from the street. The freezer door a pale rectangle against the back wall. Luca followed, then 4 more men, moving with the silent coordination of professionals who'd done this dozens of times before. Within 12 minutes, they transformed Mancini's into a trap. Two men positioned themselves in the office, sight lines covering the dining room entrance. Two more in the dry storage room, angles on the kitchen approach. Luca took the basement stairs, confirming the speakeasy tunnel was clear, then stationed himself at the bottom where he could cover both the staircase and the emergency route. Salvatore remained in the kitchen with Susie, visible through the service window but protected by shadows and strategic positioning. Susie stood near the prep counter, hands no longer bandaged but still tender, wearing dark clothes Salvatore's people had provided. She'd refused body armor. "If Robert sees me looking scared and protected, it ruins the effect," she'd said. Salvatore hadn't argued. Fear management was personal. At 7:43 p.m., headlights swept across the front windows. Salvatore touched his earpiece. "Count?" "2 vehicles," came the response from the spotter across the street. "7 men total. Carboni leadership. I see Matteo and his brother, and the manager, Robert Mitchell." Susie's breath caught, barely audible. Salvatore glanced at her. She nodded once sharply. "Ready." The front door opened. 5 men entered the dining room, their footsteps loud in the empty restaurant. Matteo Carboni led, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from a decade of unopposed operations. His brother Enzo flanked him, hand near his jacket. 3 soldiers spread out, scanning for threats they wouldn't see until too late. And Robert. Walking between the soldiers like a man who'd already won, his earlier panic replaced with vindicated smugness. He'd brought the Carbonus. He'd created a war. He thought he'd solved his Susie problem forever. Then he looked toward the kitchen. The service window framed her perfectly. Susie stood in clear view, backlit by the prep area's emergency lighting, very much alive, watching him with an expression Robert had never seen before. Not fear, not even anger, something colder, calculated. Robert's face went white. He stumbled, caught himself on a chair. She's something wrong?" Matteo's voice was silk over steel. "She's supposed to be dead." The words burst out before Robert could stop them. "I locked her in. I cut the power. She should be..." "Careful." Salvatore stepped out from the kitchen shadows, visible now in the dining room doorway. "You're confessing." Matteo's hand moved toward his weapon. Every one of his soldiers tensed. "I wouldn't," Salvatore said calmly. The lights blazed on, all of them. Dining room, kitchen, every corner of Mancini's suddenly bright as an operating theater. Salvatore's men materialized from their positions. Office door, storage room, basement stairs. 8 weapons trained on the Carboni crew from overlapping angles. No escape routes, no cover. Perfect enfilade. Matteo froze, hands still hovering near his jacket. His soldiers had nowhere to go, caught in a kill zone they'd walked into blind. "Sit," Salvatore said. "All of you." They sat. Even Robert, pushed into a chair by Enzo, who looked more angry than afraid. Matteo's eyes tracked across the room, calculating odds, finding none favorable. "You said minimal security," Matteo said tightly. "I lied." Salvatore remained in the kitchen doorway, weapon lowered but ready. "You wanted a meeting? Let's meet. You demanded Susie Charles as evidence. There she is. Ask your questions." Matteo looked at Robert, then at Susie, then back to Salvatore. "Mitchell told us you manufactured this emergency, used it as pretext to invade our territory." "Mitchell," Salvatore said, "is a liar who tried to murder a woman because she filed HR complaints. The emergency was real. The woman nearly died. I responded to a wrong number and found her 20 minutes from hypothermia death in that freezer." He gestured toward the walk-in. "The same freezer your witness had modified specifically to trap victims." "That's not," Robert started. "Shut up." Matteo's voice cracked like a whip. He studied Susie with professional assessment. "Is that true? He locked you in there?" Susie stepped forward, emerging from the kitchen into the dining room proper. Her footsteps echoed in the tense silence. She walked until she stood 5 feet from Robert, close enough to see the panic in his eyes. "He locked me in the dark," she said quietly. "Cut the power. Removed the interior handle 6 months ago so nobody could escape. Left me to die because I'd threatened to report him to the owners." She paused. "I sent one text. My hands were shaking. I misdialed one digit. That text reached Mr. Moretti instead of my father. He came anyway." "She's lying," Robert said, but his voice had gone hollow. "She's working with him. This is all your text messages to the food supplier." Salvatore pulled out his phone, held it up. "Canceling deliveries. Your email to Marco, telling him to call in sick. The breaker box with your fingerprints. Power cut to the freezer at 11:47 p.m. The modified bolt lock you installed personally." He lowered the phone. "You planned this for months. She wasn't your first attempt, just the first one who survived." Matteo was staring at Robert now, and Susie recognized that look. She'd seen it before, in customers who just realized they'd been served the wrong order, that their evening was ruined, that someone had wasted their time with incompetence. "You used us," Matteo said softly. "You spun a story about territorial invasion to cover up attempted murder." "I thought you have arrangements with Mancini's. I thought we had arrangements with Mancini's owners. Not with you. Not for this." Matteo stood slowly, carefully, aware of the weapon still trained on him. He looked at Salvatore. "We have a problem." "You have a problem," Salvatore corrected. "I have a woman under my protection and a restaurant manager who tried to kill her. The restaurant sits on disputed territory. Then let's settle it. Here. Now." Salvatore's voice hardened. "Mancini's is neutral. Neither yours nor mine. The owners pay neither of us. Anyone who operates there does so independently. Agreed?" Matteo considered, running calculations. He was outnumbered, outpositioned, and his justification for being here had just evaporated. Starting a war over Robert Mitchell's lies would make him look weak and foolish. "Agreed," he said finally. "Neutral territory, no protection racket, no interference, no claims." "Good." Salvatore gestured to his men. Weapons lowered fractionally. "Take your crew and leave. Mitchell stays." Robert lunged from his chair, making it 3 steps toward the door, before Luca materialized from the basement stairs, blocking his path. Robert spun, looking for another exit, finding only Salvatore's men closing in. "Please," Robert whispered. "Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you did." Susie's voice cut through his pleading. She walked closer until they stood face to face. "You locked me in the dark. You left me to die. You thought nobody would care enough to come. I'm sorry. Now you're in the dark." She looked past him to Salvatore. "What happens to him?" Salvatore crossed the dining room, each step measured, deliberate. He stopped beside Robert, studied him the way someone might study an insect. "The freezer door still has that special lock," Salvatore said conversationally. "The one you installed. Extra heavy duty. The kind that makes sure nobody gets out." Robert's knees gave out. 2 of Salvatore's men caught him, hauled him upright. "No," Robert breathed. "No, please, not that." They dragged him toward the kitchen, toward the pale rectangle of the freezer door. His screams started before they even reached it, high and desperate. the sound of a man who understood exactly what he'd done to others and was about to experience firsthand. Susie watched him go. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, no closure. Just a cold certainty that some people created their own hells, and Robert Mitchell had spent 6 months building his. The freezer door opened. Robert fought, begged, offered money, information, anything. It didn't matter. The door closed with that distinctive, heavy metallic thunk. The bolt slid home. Then silence. Salvatore turned to Susie. "Feel better?" "No," she said honestly, "but I feel finished." "Good enough." He looked at Matteo, who was already moving his crew toward the exit. "We're done here." The Carboni men left without another word. The restaurant emptied quickly, professionally, Salvatore's crew extracting through the delivery entrance as cleanly as they'd entered. Susie stood alone in the dining room she'd worked in for 3 years, listening to the faint sounds from the freezer. Pounding, screaming, the desperate noise of a trapped man. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911. "There's been an incident at Mancini's restaurant," she said calmly. "Someone's trapped in the walk-in freezer. You should send police and an ambulance. He'll need one." She hung up, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. The compound gardens looked different in morning light. Susie sat on the stone bench near the fountain, watching condensation rise from her coffee cup in the cold January air. 3 days had passed since Mancini's. 3 days of debriefings, documentation, and the quiet efficiency of Salvatore's organization erasing evidence like it had never existed. Robert Mitchell had been found in the freezer by police, hypothermic but alive. He was in the hospital now, under guard, facing attempted murder charges based on an anonymous tip that included detailed evidence of his modifications to the freezer and his pattern of harassment. The Carboni family had publicly distanced themselves from him. Mancini's owners had signed a protection contract with Salvatore's organization, ending the territorial dispute with paperwork rather than bloodshed. Everything had been resolved. Clean, professional, complete, which meant Susie's usefulness had ended. Footsteps on gravel announced Salvatore's approach. He sat beside her on the bench, his own coffee steaming in the morning chill. For a moment they simply sat in companionable silence, watching the fountain's water catch the weak winter sunlight. "You're free to go," Salvatore said finally. "I've made arrangements. New city, Denver if you want it, or Portland, somewhere far from here. New identity, complete documentation, enough money to start fresh. 6 months of living expenses, more if you're careful. You can walk away from all of this." Susie took a sip of coffee. It was good coffee, the expensive kind she'd never been able to afford on a waitress salary. "And if I don't want to go," he turned to look at her, expression curious rather than surprised. "Why would you stay? You're not part of this world. You stumbled into it because you misdialed one number. That doesn't obligate you to anything." "I know." She set her cup down on the bench between them. "But I've been thinking about that night in the freezer, about being powerless, about Robert locking that door and knowing, absolutely knowing that I couldn't stop him, that I'd just take it, because I always took it. You filed complaints, words on paper, HR forms that went nowhere." Her voice hardened. "I've been powerless my whole life, Mr. Moretti, taking orders from men like Robert, accepting mistreatment because I needed the paycheck, making myself small and quiet and unthreatening because that's how you survive when you have no leverage." Salvatore listened without interrupting, his attention complete. "For the first time," Susie continued, "I'm not small. I stood in that restaurant and watched Robert drag to the freezer he'd turned into a death trap. I watched the Carbonus back down because you refused to treat me like property. I used my memory, this thing I've always thought was just a party trick, to help plan a counter ambush that saved lives. She met his eyes. For the first time in my life, I mattered. I had power, real power. Power in my world comes with costs, Salvatore said quietly. You can't go back to normal after this. Can't unknow what you've learned. Can't unsee what you've seen. I don't want to go back. The certainty in her voice surprised even herself. I want to go forward. I want to work for you. Intelligence, observation, memory, I'm good at it. Better than good. You said it yourself. I did. He picked up his coffee, considering. What exactly do you think you're signing up for? Remembering things, noticing patterns, being the person who sees what cameras miss and surveillance can't capture. She paused. Being useful in a way that matters. In a way that protects people instead of just serving them overpriced pasta. Salvatore almost smiled. You have a romanticized view of what I do. No, I don't. I saw what happened at Mancini's. I know people died in conflicts like that. I know you're not running a charity. She leaned forward slightly. But I also know you came for me when you didn't have to. You could have ignored that text. Could have written it off as someone else's problem. You didn't. I made a calculated decision. You made a choice that saved my life. And then you made choices that kept me alive when it would have been easier to hand me over. She held his gaze. I want to make choices too. Conscious ones. I choose this. I choose staying. The fountain burbled in the silence that followed. A bird landed on the rim, pecked at the water, flew away. The work isn't glamorous, Salvatore said finally. Mostly it's sitting in restaurants, watching people, remembering faces and conversations, filing reports, connecting dots that seem meaningless until they form patterns. I've been doing that for 3 years already. I just wasn't being paid for it. You'll be a target. Robert was small time. There are worse predators in this city, and they'll see you as leverage against me. I'm already a target. The moment you refused to hand me over, I became part of this whether I wanted to be or not. She picked up her coffee again, warming her hands. At least this way, I'm a target who knows she's a target. Who can prepare? Who has resources? Salvatore studied her with that calculating expression she'd learned meant he was running scenarios, testing possibilities. You understand this is permanent. There's no trial period, no quitting when it gets difficult. Once you're in my organization, you're in. The only way out is relocation or death. I understand. You'll follow orders, even ones you disagree with. Within reason. I'm not killing people. I'm not asking you to. You're intelligence, not enforcement. He stood looking down at her. But if I tell you to disappear, you disappear. If I tell you to forget something, you forget it. If I tell you someone is off limits, they're off limits. My world works on loyalty and discipline. Can you live with that? Susie stood as well, meeting him at eye level. She was taller than she'd realized, or maybe she'd just spent 3 years making herself smaller. I can live with that better than I can live with going back to being invisible. You were never invisible. You just weren't valued. He extended his hand. Welcome to the organization, Susie Charles. Try not to make me regret this. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, professional, the handshake of equals entering a contract. I'll do my best. Your first assignment starts Monday. There's a restaurant in River North, upscale place, politicians and business owners. I need to know who's meeting with whom and what they're discussing. Think you can handle that? I've handled worse. Yes, Salvatore said, releasing her hand. You have. He walked back toward the main house, leaving her alone with her coffee and the fountain and the morning light. Susie sat back down on the bench, looking at her hands. No longer bandaged, no longer shaking. She'd sent a text to the wrong number, and it had ended with a war. But it had also ended with a choice. Her choice. To stop being small, to stop being powerless, to transform the worst night of her life into the foundation of something new. She finished her coffee, stood, and walked toward the house. She had work to do, training to complete, a new life to build from the ashes of the old one. For the first time in 26 years, Susie Charles was exactly where she wanted to be. The training room in Salvatore's compound had been a wine cellar once. Now it held maps, surveillance equipment, personnel files, and the accumulated intelligence of 23 years in Chicago's shadow economy. Susie spent 6 hours a day there for 2 weeks, learning the architecture of power, who controlled what, where territories overlapped, which families maintained uneasy truces, and which were one insult from open war. Luca ran most of the sessions, his teaching style blunt and efficient. Forget everything you think you know about criminals, he'd said on day one. This isn't about good and evil. It's about power, territory, and respect. Learn the language or get killed by misunderstanding it. She learned. The Carboni family's restaurant holdings, the DeLuca crew's gambling operations, the shifting alliances that change with marriages, deaths, and betrayals. She memorized faces from surveillance photos, connected names to operations, built mental maps that overlaid the city's official geography with its hidden power structures. You're a natural, Luca admitted grudgingly after she identified a potential territory conflict 3 days before it manifested. Better instincts than people I've known for years. The first real assignment came on a Thursday. River North, upscale Italian place called Giordano's, where politicians and business owners held court over veal ossobuco and $30 glasses of wine. Salvatore needed to know who was talking to whom, what alliances were forming, which city contracts were being discussed in whispers between courses. Susie walked in wearing a simple black dress, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. The coat check position had been arranged in advance, a quiet spot near the entrance where she could observe the entire dining room while remaining functionally invisible. Service industry camouflage. People looked through coat check girls the way they looked through waitresses. She'd counted on that blindness, built her new career on it. For 4 hours, she watched, memorized faces, overheard conversations, noted who arrived together and who pretended not to know each other until their third drink. A city alderman met with a construction company CEO. A police captain shared a table with someone Susie recognized from the DeLuca surveillance photos. A young prosecutor laughed too loudly with a defense attorney whose clients were exclusively organized crime. Every detail burned into her memory with perfect clarity. The debrief happened at midnight in Salvatore's office. She spoke for 40 minutes without notes, reconstructing the evening with photographic precision. Who sat where, what they discussed, the alderman's nervous tics when talk turned to zoning permits, the police captain's careful phone call in the bathroom, the prosecutor's expensive watch, far beyond his salary. Salvatore listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes, his expression giving nothing away. When she finished, silence stretched between them. The prosecutor, he said finally, you notice the watch. Rolex Submariner, retail around $15,000. He's been on the job 3 years, makes maybe $80,000. Either he's independently wealthy or someone's paying him. The DeLucas are paying him, have been for 18 months. But I didn't know he'd gotten careless enough to wear it in public. Salvatore leaned back in his chair. You identified a vulnerability I missed. That's valuable. It's just noticing things. It's intelligence work, and you're better at it than people I've trained for years. He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a phone. Not a burner, a real smartphone in a leather case. He slid it across the desk to her. Your number, direct line. You're in the inner circle now. Susie picked up the phone, feeling its weight. A real number, not temporary, not disposable, permanent. What does that mean exactly? It means you report directly to me. It means you have access to information most people in this organization never see. It means you're trusted. He paused. It also means you're a priority target if anyone wants to hurt me. The phone has security protocols. Learn them. I will. Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow night, another assignment. Fundraiser at the Art Institute. Bigger crowd, more complex dynamics. She stood, pocketing the phone. At the door, she hesitated. Mr. Moretti, thank you. For what? For seeing potential instead of liability. Thank you for proving me right. In her quarters, no longer a guest room but permanent space in the compound, Susie stood before the mirror. The woman looking back had changed. Same face, same dark hair, but something fundamental had shifted. Posture straighter, eyes harder. The waitress who'd scrubbed marinara from dish nozzles had disappeared, replaced by someone who moved through the world with purpose and power. She didn't look invisible anymore. 2 months later, Susie walked into Mancini's restaurant for the first time since the ambush. The owners had renovated after the incident. New kitchen equipment, updated dining room, fresh paint that couldn't quite cover the memory of what had happened here. But the fundamental geography remained the same. 22 tables, 4 booths, the bar along the east wall. The new manager, a competent woman named Angela, who knew exactly who owned the protection contract, nodded respectfully when Susie entered. The waitstaff recognized her too, though none of them had worked here during her time. Word traveled in the service industry. The woman who'd survived Robert Mitchell, the woman who worked for Moretti now. Susie walked through the dining room, no longer avoiding eye contact, no longer making herself small. Customers sensed the shift even if they couldn't name it, the way prey animals sense a predator passing through their territory. She wasn't here to serve. She was here to observe, to remember, to wield the power that came from seeing what others missed. She took the corner booth, the same booth where Robert had once cornered her to make inappropriate comments while she balanced a tray of drinks. The table was different now, but the location remained a deliberate choice, reclaiming space. Salvatore arrived 10 minutes later, sliding into the seat across from her. He ordered coffee for both of them without asking. The presumption of someone who knew her preferences through weeks of debriefings and late-night strategy sessions. Any regrets? He asked when the coffee arrived. Susie considered the question seriously. She thought about the freezer, the darkness, the certainty of death. She thought about the wrong number that had saved her life. She thought about the choice she'd made in the garden, to stay rather than run, to claim power rather than accept safety. Only that I didn't mistype that number sooner, she said. Salvatore smiled, a genuine expression, rare and brief. Fate has timing we don't control. Maybe. Susie looked around the restaurant that had once been her prison, now transformed into just another piece of territory in the larger map she'd learned to read. Or maybe fate is just what we call the consequences of our choices. Philosophical, practical. I chose to report Robert. He chose to try to kill me. I chose to text for help. You chose to respond. Robert chose to call the car bonus. I chose to stay. She met his eyes. Every choice led here. That's not fate. That's just people making decisions and living with the outcomes. And you're satisfied with your outcome. She thought about the phone in her pocket, the assignments that challenged her, the respect she'd earned through competence rather than compliance. She thought about walking into rooms and being seen, really seen, for the first time in her life. Yes, she said simply, I am. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. Outside, Chicago went about its business, unaware of the invisible architecture that governed its streets. Territory and power, respect and fear, the careful balance that kept the city functioning beneath its official surface. Susie had learned to see that architecture. More than see it, she learned to navigate it, to use it, to shape it with the intelligence she provided. The wrong number had saved her life, pulling her from certain death in a freezer. But the right choice, the conscious decision to stop being powerless, to claim agency over her own existence, to transform trauma into opportunity, that choice had given her a new one. She stood, leaving cash on the table out of old habit, though Salvatore waved it away. They walked out together, through the restaurant where she'd once been invisible, past staff who now watched her with wary respect. The night was cold and clear. Chicago stretched before them, a city of 8 million stories, most of them hidden. Susie had become one of the people who saw the hidden ones, who remembered them, who understood that power wasn't about violence or intimidation. It was about information, timing, and the courage to act when the moment came. A wrong number had ended with a war, but it had also ended with a transformation. Susie Charles had locked in a freezer, dying in the dark. She'd walked out an operator in Chicago's shadow economy, and she'd never felt more alive.